started, and then people can be joining us, and the meeting will be recorded. So if somebody joins late, they can always catch up on what they missed. So welcome to all of you who are joining us for the Reimagine Flood Park Community Meeting. As I mentioned before, it will be recorded. So if a friend of yours wanted to attend but was unable to attend, they will be able to listen to the recording after the meeting. Michael, you want to go to the next slide? So I just wanted to share with you the purpose of this meeting is to share the updated revised landscape plan for Flood Park and answer any questions you might have about this updated plan. My name is Linda Gates. I'm with Gates and Associates. We're landscape architects, and our mission is to promote community health and well-being by getting people outside. Michael is helping me tonight by being your administrator. Nicholas from the County of San Mateo is also joining us. Nicholas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Nicholas Calderon. I'm director of the San Mateo County Parks Department. And we are, as you know, the managers and operators of Flood Park and have been leading this effort. So we're very excited to present the landscape plan to everyone tonight and answer any questions you have.
And then we also have Victor joining us to provide translation. Victor, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Linda. Yes, hi, my name is Victor Hernandez. I am a Spanish interpreter that contracts with the County of San Mateo, and I'll be providing all of the Spanish interpretation for tonight. Muy buenas noches, me llamo Víctor Hernández y soy un traductor del español. Soy un contratista independiente que contrato con el Condado de San Mateo y les voy a proveer toda la traducción esta noche.
So hopefully if you need of translation, you can dial up Victor and he'll provide that translation for you. So tonight we're going to provide a little brief welcome and some instructions on how this meeting is going to run. Zoom, I think everybody's really familiar right now, but it's always nice to review the protocols and give you a little brief overview of the project and how we got here and where we are to date and the changes that have occurred. But the bulk of the meeting is going to be dedicated to question and answers. We received some already from the community and we'll respond to some of those initially. And then you can add questions in your chat box as you go through if you want us to respond to them when we get to the question and answer, or during the question and answer period, you can also raise your hand. So, and I wanted to just show you there that we also have the email at the website you can check out. So go back. There's there. If you want to visit on the site after the meeting and kind of look at some of the materials in more detail, you're welcome to join us there. Next slide. So as I said, I think most of you are really familiar with this, but during the presentation, you're muted. At the end of the presentation, if you want to hit raise your hand, then Michael will be watching for you and he'll unmute you and you'll have an opportunity to ask a question. We're trying to ask people to limit their questions to 1 or 2 questions each time they raise their hand, just so we make sure everyone has a chance to participate, and then we'll cycle back around and start answering questions again. But as I said, if during the presentation, some questions occur to you like addressed when we stop the presentation, you can enter those in the chat box as well. And here's just repeating, if you need Spanish translation, you can call this number and Victor will provide a translation to the materials that you're seeing on the screen. Next slide. So Nick, you want to talk to us a little bit about how we got to where we are right now?
Yeah, so this has been an extensive process starting all the way back in 2015. And through a series of public workshops, the department developed the preferred plan and started drafting the environmental review document. And so that environmental review document came in the form of a draft EIR and a final EIR. Back in 2019, we updated that to reflect some more accurate information and to address some issues that we were hearing. And so in 2019, we went through the revised environmental impact process. As some of you will recall, in November of 2019, this went before the Board of Supervisors. And at that time, the board had asked the department to go back to the drawing board and really look at how we could address some of the issues being expressed during public testimony at their meeting. And the main issues that came up at that time were the placement of the field, the soccer lacrosse field, and some noise generating issues, as well as the accuracy of some of the data we used. The department's gone through and updated all of that information, revised the landscape plan. And so that's what brings us to where we are today. So today, as Linda said, we will be looking at the revised landscape plan, what's in it, and then the department will be presenting to the Menlo Park and Rec Commission later this month. On November 10th, we'll be presenting this to the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors for their consideration for certification of the EIR and adoption of the landscape plan. And so that's at November 2020. If the board were to certify the EIR, and if the board were to adopt the landscape plan, then what would happen is we would go into a design phase and a community engagement phase. And that would last for approximately a year. And so during that phase, during that time, we would go through the detailed design. So as you'll see today, this is really a concept plan and does not include the 100% plans and specs. And so that's what would happen during 2021. And then we would break ground for phase 1 on 2022. So that's kind of where we are, how we got here, and what the next steps are.
Michael? So as Nicholas mentioned, back in 2015, Gates was retained to work with the community to reimagine a vision for Flood Park. Flood Park at that time was a beloved park, still is a beloved park, but it had an aging infrastructure. And there was also a need to maybe respond to some emerging recreation trends within the community. There was also a desire to make sure we expanded the range of users served by the park and maybe create some community social gathering areas and such. Next slide. We held a number of community meetings and surveys discussing the elements of the park people loved and we wanted to make sure we retained, and types of uses people would like to see in the park. In terms of existing uses, the playgrounds, picnic areas, and sports fields were really high priorities for people, whereas the petanque court was a pretty low priority for most people. The desired new uses included soccer, basketball, and more passive uses like demonstration gardens and improved walking paths. Next slide. So we developed the 2016 landscape plan. And in that plan, there was sort of a central organizing spine. The petanque court was removed. 2 of the existing tennis courts were removed to make way for a new soccer field, a bike park, a basketball court, and a demonstration garden area. The parking area was also reconfigured and expanded to increase the available parking stalls to 369 stalls. Next slide. During the review of the 2016 plan, there was a desire to create a setback for some of the more intense noise generating uses for the neighbors. So we needed to look at the location of the soccer field, the group picnic areas, and the tennis courts. So we decided, and also there was a desire at that time to try and accommodate an additional soccer field. So we got comments wanting more sports and comments wanting to make sure that we pulled those uses away from the adjacent neighbors. So next slide. So we went back to the drawing board and we developed a plan that incorporated a 100-foot setback along the property line. And in this setback, the only uses that are allowed are the more passive uses like drop-in picnic and walking paths and such. We also looked at overlaying a soccer field onto the outfield of the existing baseball field and a smaller soccer field along Bay Road. The overlay in the existing soccer field of the existing baseball field, we can accommodate up to 140 yards by 85 yards. So that allows us to like sort of adjust the location of the soccer field and have outfield areas and such. In the meadow area, we had a smaller soccer field that is 60 by 110 yards. Next slide. Of course, this relocation and rethinking of the location of facilities had to be done with careful consideration of the existing tree canopy. preservation of the tree canopy and the historic adobe character of the park were one of the high values the community had through the master plan process. There are over 900 trees in the site. We inventoried and evaluated the 300 trees in those areas where improvements were potentially proposed. And specialist care was taken when siting the improvements to protect all the heritage trees, so they were sacred. The EIR on the 2016 plan had evaluated the impacts of that plan, and that plan had required the removal of 80 trees of varying value. Some of these trees are shrubs that grew up into trees, and some are, nicer trees. The revised 2020 plan that you see before it would remove less than the 80 trees that were evaluated in the EIR in 2016. Next slide. In both the 2016 and the 2020 plan, the intent is to retain the existing picnic areas. Picnic areas were a high priority. There is currently one large group reservable area and 7 smaller reservable areas. All those areas are retained with the quantity of existing tables, although their location may be shifted and the tables and the whole area will be improved. We also retained drop-in picnic areas throughout the park site. Next slide. The plan seeks to address the needs of a range of users. So we wanted to make sure we provided low impact contemplative retreat spaces like the walking path, maybe exercise station, a demonstration garden were sort of some of the uses that were seen as some of the passive uses. Next slide. We wanted to make sure and accommodate the play areas for both that are comfortable both children and their parents. So there's 5 to 12, the under 5, and also even an adventure player over one of the group picnic areas. So the play areas would all be redone under this master plan. Organized sports would be accommodated in the baseball field and the 2 soccer lacrosse fields that we discussed earlier in the plan. As we said, we also wanted to appeal to a greater range of users. So we have 2 tennis courts, a small pump track area, a basketball court, sand volleyball, and so that you have a range of users that could enjoy the park. Nick, you want to talk about some of the impacts that have come up in the EIR?
Yeah, so one of the things that came up during the board presentation in November of 2019 was noise. And so, as Linda has discussed, there's a 100-foot setback from houses along Del Norte, which was something that the department had committed to several years ago and was included in the documents presented to the board in 2019. And as you can see on the illustration here, there's a delineation line on the right-hand side of the park, and that's the 100-foot setback. So as you can see, there are no courts or play fields or sport fields within that 100-foot setback. We do have some walking trails. There will be some picnic sites in there, but we have committed to not having any play fields or sport fields there. And as you can see in the illustration here, we've been able to accomplish that. One of the issues that led to this was noise, and we were also told that sound amplification equipment and air horns were of great concern to some of the nearby residents. And so what the department has made sure was included in the EIR is that in order to use a sound amplification equipment, so a speaker or any other device that amplifies music, announcing, anything like that, you need a permit. And so the department will have to review each permit request on a case-by-case basis to determine if the use is consistent with what the experience we're trying to offer at the park is, if we believe that the use is consistent with what we have committed to the neighborhood as to how we will allow the park to be used. And we've also committed that as a mitigation measure, no air horns will be allowed in any capacity at the park. So even if an individual has a special event permit, they will not be allowed to use an air horn. And these are the type of mitigation measures that we are putting in place to limit the impact of noise on adjacent areas. The other mitigation measure I think that's important to call out is that is that sport fields can only be programmed and scheduled for use between the hours of 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. or whenever the park closes. And so what this means is that we're able to push the start time back for sporting events, and we're not having those events occur going late into the night when you would enter the hours where people would be most disturbed by that noise. So by using mitigation measures and committing to those, we've been able to reduce the impact that noise will have on neighboring properties. And what you can see in front of you is a chart that comes directly out of the environmental analysis. And one of the issues that came up in the past was that there was questions as to the accuracy of the numbers. So what we've done is we've looked at each amenity in the park, and we've looked at it both on a peak capacity and a daily capacity, both during the week and the weekend. And so what this is showing is how many people we anticipate to be using each facility, and whether it's at that peak capacity throughout the day, and then how many people we are expecting to serve on a daily basis, both during the week and during the weekend. And the reason this analysis is so important is because it sets up our trip generation, our parking demand, our noise calculations. And so, as you can see, there have been significant changes made to this from the last iteration that went forward. And once again, that is to make sure that the data in it is as accurate as possible and reflects what we are actually seeing or anticipating seeing in the park.
Next slide.
Next slide.
So assuming the Board of Supervisors approves the landscape plan concept, we will then begin to proceed and open up again to design phase meetings and community meetings to basically finalize the design and tweak it around. We received a number of recommended adjustments to the plans from the community, and those would be sort of the basis that began to look at, you know, should we shift the location of this or shift the location of that and such. But it all would be done in the parameters of what the EIR has reviewed, like retaining the setback, not removing any more trees than have been prescribed, not intensifying the use based what prescribed. So as I said, we've received a number of comments about recommended adjustments that we're documenting so that as the next phase, those come forward as the things the community would like to see looked at further. And ideally, and we'll be building something and you'll be getting to enjoy some of the improvements in the late 2020, 2023. So with the next slide, we're going to open it up to question and answers. We had received a number of questions already, so we thought we'd run through kind of responses to some of these questions, just because I have a feeling they might be questions that a lot of people might have. And then people can raise their hands and we'll pick up from the chat room any questions that came in that aren't already like addressed in some of these questions that came in earlier. So we're just going to run through them, and Nicholas, you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. So question one, when will renovation begin and how long will it take? At this time, we're anticipating that if the board were to certify the EIR and adopt the landscape plan in November of 2020, we would start the design process in early 2021. And so that process would take an entire year. And that would include, as I stated earlier, the detailed designs as to the specific locations, as to where things are going. Not to say that amenities are going to be moving, but I mean the actual GPS location of where the field will be located, where are the underground utilities going to be running, any type of grading that needs to be done, elevations, all of that, the engineered plans. So that will take about a year. We'll also need to go through a detailed SFPUC permitting process as they have a pipeline that runs through the center of the park. So that will take about a year. And then we anticipate that phase one of the project will take about another year to construct. And the reason that that's going to take so long is because of what's included in phase one, which includes all of the grading of the site, all of the demolition of the site, installation and construction of all the subsurface utilities, and then the construction of some of the play fields. And so when you look at the magnitude of what's going on, that's just going to take a long time to do it right and to do it in the most careful way. So we're expecting about another 2 years before that phase one would be done. And then we would be able to start looking at phase two and phase three. And so will sections of Flood Park be accessible during construction? It depends on which phase we're referring to and what is going on in that phase. During phase one, much of the park will be closed because of the demolition and the grading and the equipment that's on site. But most certainly as phase one starts coming to an end and construction is limited to a very specific portion of the park, we'll be able to open up other areas. During phase two and phase three, the improvements that were constructed during phase one, we fully anticipate will be accessible and available at that time. So will the playground be removed in phase one, but not rebuilt until phase two? So that's correct, that the playground will likely need to be demolished during phase one, depending on the utility plans. But we do plan, we do not anticipate that the playground would be able to be moved to phase one for construction, but a lot of this depends on timing and funding. So is there a chance that phase one and phase two can be moved forward at the same time? Those are things that we have to look at the time. And at this point, without knowing where we're gonna be financially at that time, I can't answer that question with a definitive answer. Is it possible to revise the construction phase to minimize the amount of time the playground is not available to the neighborhood? I think that's something that we're open to, and we definitely want to give consideration to that. We do need to, during the design phase, though, look at what makes the most sense for the overall project. But naturally, we want to make sure that the park is serving the public as much as possible. So during that design phase, we're going to have to be looking at all of that. When will construction of the volleyball courts begin? Volleyball courts, I believe, will be part of phase one, and get the specific one right here. But once again, phase one is an extensive process that includes demolition, grading, and then reconstruction. So phase one is going to be a very extensive process that will take a lot of time, frankly. Can the community provide input in the design of the sand volleyball courts? Yeah, that's what the design process is for. So we're all for that. And I apologize, going back, sand volleyball will actually be part of phase one. So sand volleyball will be rebuilt as phase one. And yes, that's what the design process is for. What we're laying out here is what type of facilities, the number of those facilities, but we want a community process, and we want a proper community engagement process. So we are open to having feedback on that. What type of dog access will be incorporated into the landscape plan? So the department is going through a extensive evaluation of dog access to all of our parks. And we're in the middle of conducting a environmental review for dog use on the coast side. What we would be willing to evaluate and look at is on-leash access at Flood Park. Given the number of amenities that are going to be there, the number of sports fields, a bike facility, the number of playgrounds and picnic sites and reservation sites, we believe that on-leash access is really the most appropriate for that facility. And that's something that we would, we would absolutely look into incorporating when the landscape plan is done and when we're able to get that going. Will benches be located throughout the park? Yes. How many oak trees will be removed for the fields? So as part of the landscape plan, as Linda stated, there's 72 trees that are being impacted in total. Of those 72, 34 are oak trees and of varying sizes. So I think we need to keep in mind that some of those trees are going to be 3 inches in diameter versus 24 inches in diameter. And so we need to be conscientious of that as well. How many heritage trees would be removed in order to implement the plan? 0. There will be no heritage trees removed as part of the plan. How were the ball field dimensions and locations derived? So we looked at what we were hearing the greatest need was, as well as what the greatest versatility would give. And so that is how we identified the play field dimensions. So the dimensions that we came up with not only support youth sports, but can also support high school sports and adult leagues. So this park will be able to serve the community as a whole. And that's how we develop the size for these fields. How will usage of ball fields be determined? So the department's going through a evaluation phase that allows us to understand what other jurisdictions are doing. So some jurisdictions plan out their fields 12 months in advance. Some do it seasonally. And so the department's going to have to come up with a detailed plan as to how we're scheduling these fields. But and that's something that we're going to have to do. We haven't written that plan up yet, but what we are working on right now is understanding what the best practices are so that when the time comes, we are able to determine what is the best way of scheduling and programming those fields to meet the greatest needs. So we don't have that written up yet, but we are in the phase where we're discussing with jurisdictions like San Mateo and Menlo Park to understand how they are doing it. So I know I kind of talked through that pretty quickly. I want to make sure that there's additional time for questions, but Linda, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you all.
So a couple of questions came in while you were talking,
Yeah.
Nick, and I'm going to have you do that. One was a question about who's in charge of the scheduling. I think it's the county Park and Rec staff is in charge of the scheduling. The next one is, the park is currently dark at night. Will night lights be added, and how late will the park be open?
Yeah, so happy to answer that. Let me catch up with you here on the chat window here. So I guess the park is currently dark at night. Will night lights be added? No, night lights will not be added. And so the way this will work is throughout the year, the closing time of the park changes with the time the sun sets. And so if the park is closing at 7 o'clock, we're not going to allow sport activity to go on until 8 o'clock. If the park closes at 7, everyone needs to be out by 7. So that's how we'll do that. Linda, what was the other question you asked?
The first, I'm picking it's like, who's in charge of scheduling of the fields?
Yeah, that would be the department. The Parks Department will be responsible for developing the policy and the procedure for that, and for staffing that function. And so, sport leagues will be responsible for submitting the request to the department, and the department will be responsible for scheduling that out.
And there are a number of questions that ask about reconsidering the idea of putting in Off-Leash Dog Park here and what the potential of that is.
Yeah, there will not be an off-leash dog facility as part of Flood Park. That is not something that was ever part of the iterations, the earlier iterations. It wasn't part of, what came before the board in November. And we believe that the plan that we've brought forward is reflective of what we've heard from the community to date. And that's what's really been important, is making sure that we're hearing what these concerns are and we're accommodating that. And that's not something that we've been hearing up to date.
So if to the community, I've tried to pick up some of the chats. If I didn't get it, if you want to raise your hands and ask questions, Michael can unmute you so you can ask your questions directly, but I still be monitoring the chat if that's just your more comfortable place for you to participate.
So the first, we have two raised hands. The first one I saw was Peter Griffin. I will unmute them.
Peter, I think, okay, great.
Hello. So I see that Ms. Gates showed one slide with a black woman walking her dog on leash, and I don't know if that was to show that you weren't racist or that you weren't anti-dog.
Probably both, but it was just a picture that we had of a dog. So yes.
Okay, next up will be Alice Newton.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Alice.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank you.
Oops.
Oh,
Sorry,
we
Alice.
lost Alice.
I think we lost you, Alice.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to just have two questions. And one is whether you expect the all of these sports fields, including the volleyball courts and the basketball and others, to be available to the public, or will they all be reservable? That's one question, and then I have another one.
Alice, if I understand your question correctly, are you asking if we plan to have the field reserved 100% of the time, or do we plan on having them available for drop-in use and having periods of time where the fields are not being under reservation? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, and also, Nick, the other courts like volleyball and basketball, tennis, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we absolutely plan on having the ability for people to drop in and use those. I don't think having it programmed every second of every day is the way we're going to pursue this.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Another question I have is just, what plan do you all have to manage the traffic congestion that could likely occur with all these wonderful amenities at the entrance to the park at Bay Road, the entrance and exit where people are going to be coming and going and turning this way and that way? That could be a big congestion point.
Yeah, Alex. So I guess the first thing I'd say is earlier this year, the department eliminated the vehicle entrance fee, and I believe that someone has asked about that on the chat. So the department's eliminated the vehicle entrance fee. So any queuing that would have been caused by individuals waiting to pay the vehicle entrance fee, that's no longer going to be an issue. So people are able to more easily access the park. So that's one response. And then the other is, I think we need to first see if this is something that's going to happen. And if it is going to happen, then to what degree is it happening? And so the reason I can't give you a firm answer is it's hard to give a concrete answer to a question that doesn't really give me all the information as to how, what is the extent of the backing up? Is it one car? Is it 10 cars? When is it happening? Is it happening because of cars queuing, or is it happening because cars trying to make a left turn out of there? So those are all things that we have to look at and understand before I could give a concrete answer on that. But if that is something that ends up happening, then we will have to take a look at that and figure out what is the best way to manage that situation.
Can I just add, Nick, I think, all these new amenities are going to be bringing in a lot of cars, and especially without having to pay. There are going to be a lot of cars. And so I think it's very important to think ahead. You're going to have people on bicycles trying to turn, coming from Marsh Road, trying to turn in. And I think it's really important because this is going to happen when the park is full of people coming in and out of that one entrance and exit. So I think it's more reasonable, really, to expect it to happen. It has happened in the past when their park has been full, like on Easter Sunday last year and things. It happens when the park is full, and with all these things, we all expect that the parking lot is going to be full. So, this is something to give serious consideration to. So I guess that is one of my main questions, and maybe you have other people now. Thanks.
Yeah, and Alice, the last thing I would say is that if this is something that we're experiencing, then we're most certainly also going to talk to our Department of Public Works and their traffic engineers to understand, based on traffic manuals and best engineering practices? What is the right approach to resolving that? And so once again, we'd have to see the extent of the issue and what the issue is, and then we would consult with the subject matter experts to make sure we resolve it as quickly and as effectively as possible.
Next up, I have Jim Sullivan, who's next in the queue. Hello, Jim.
While Jim's unmuting himself, I'm going to quickly ask Nicholas a question that came through on chat. So I'll give you a minute there, Jim, to collect yourself. Is it possible for all ball fields to be grass and not synthetic turf? This would be better environmentally and better for the health of the ball players and neighbors.
Yeah, the department's recommendation is going to be that we use natural turf likely, but I think we also need to really look at all factors, including the maintenance of it, the cost, and the environmental impact. So there are a lot of factors that we need to consider, but I very much would like to see at least one of those fields to be natural or grass.
Jim, did that give you enough time to come back to us? Jim Sullivan? Is there somebody else with their hand raised, Michael?
Yes, I'm gonna, Jim, I'll leave your hand raised when, if you're able to, we'll get you after this question. I have next up Janet Dudley.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I attended most of the dog work group meetings for the county with regard to dog expansion into county parks. And Flood Park was left not explicitly selected as an on-leash park because of the fact that it was going to undergo this process, and the idea was to include dogs in the process. What I'd like to see is some explicit confirmation that off-leash access will be permitted in this paperwork trail, in the EIR that's submitted before the county. And I've had a conversation with Supervisor Slocum, and he would support the on-leash access. I personally would like to suggest that this park, Flood Park, be considered along the lines of Nealon Park in Menlo Park. If you've ever been there, it's ball fields, softball fields, playgrounds, picnic areas, tennis courts. It's almost as developed as the plan for Flood at this juncture. And they permit dogs to enter the field, I believe, from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. on mornings midweek. And I'm still not convinced that that couldn't be a very successful plan for Flood Park. Can you address how dogs will be explicitly and in the record addressed in Flood Park, and why we couldn't at least review the Nealon plan, if you will, for Flood?
Yeah, what I am happy to state is that I do think on-leash access is appropriate at Flood. I don't think off-leash access is appropriate at Flood, and especially when you think about 7 reservation sites, drop-in picnic sites, sports fields, playgrounds, and bike parks. I don't think off-leash dogs is the right approach here. But I do think being able to bring your dog on leash to watch your child or your niece or your nephew or whoever play a sport, soccer, lacrosse, baseball, whatever, softball, whatever it may be. I do think that's an appropriate allowed access and use, and that is something that I would be very supportive of.
Do we have any more hand raised, Michael?
Yeah, I'm gonna try Jim again if he's able to talk.
Okay, and a few more questions that come through in the chat that
Okay. I'm not sure what's going on with Jim, so we'll go on to the next person, Shari Conrad.
Ms. Conrad, are you there? So while she's, Nicholas, one of the questions is, will bikes be allowed to ride throughout the park? Also, will there be easily accessible bike parking?
Yeah, great question. So there's yes, there will be easily accessible bike parking. I believe we will have no fewer than 6 bike racks throughout the park, and I think it would likely make sense to have, if possible, maybe a couple more if we're seeing a lot of cyclists accessing the park. Will bicyclists be able to ride throughout the park? If the question is, are they allowed on the trails? I don't see why not. As long as people are obviously being safe. Do we want people riding their bikes through the ball fields? That's not something we would really want. That could be detrimental to the quality of the field. But we are, we're not, at this time, we do not intend on having plans to say you can only ride your bike, say, at the pump track, and as soon as you get in the gate, you have to walk. I don't think that's something that we've considered, and really reason being is, then does that mean a child on a strider who's learning with their parent is not allowed on the trail, right? I mean, those are things that we have to weigh and factor in.
Did Ms. Conrad come back, Michael?
I'm not sure. I have her unmuted. There should be, let's see. I'm not sure. Shari, if you want to enter your question to the chat box, we'll happily answer it. I believe Jim had his hand up and entered his question there.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and address Jim's question as best as I can. Jim's question was, seemed to be unable to unmute. Flood Park fits the definition of a T, or to a T, for both on and off leash access. Providing a fenced off leash dog area should be seriously studied. Once again, I think that Flood Park is an appropriate place for on leash dog access. And that's something that I would be in support of authorizing and making sure that you have a true family friendly environment when watching children and adults play sports, or and we'd have to look at access for bringing dogs to picnics and barbecues. But that's the extent of dog access for flood that I foresee in the future.
I wanted to let people know, some people are writing comments in the chat box, and those will be received too. There's not necessarily a question there, but a comment, but we're going to save all those comments, and that will become part of the record too. And I guess Nettie had some questions that she was not hearing to the answers to. Maybe, Nettie, is it possible for you to put, okay. Can we hear some of the comments?
Does Nettie, if Nettie has her hand up, we would likely be able to unmute her and have her ask some of those questions.
Yeah, Nettie, can you unmute?
I can unmute her if she would like to talk. Nettie, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Oh, okay. Where'd you go? Hi, Nettie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I was trying to first send a chat and it wasn't sending, and then you're saying I wasn't raising my hand, and I tried to raise it several times, so I don't know. This is a little different Zoom than I'm used to when I'm in groups that I have met with regularly. Anyway, I guess one of my first questions is, can you define what the actual field size is for the two fields? You've decided, or what you've presented on there, the large field is 260 by 430 feet and the other by 160 times 330. Is that the field size, or is that inclusive of spectators, teams, fans, etc.? That's the first question.
So you
You want to start and then I can jump in?
Yeah, the area shown in the plan is sort of the area it's available right now. How we you know, and so I'm saying the one that's the overlay on the ball field is actually a little bit bigger than you may need as a field. So it allows us to, in the next phase of design, kind of make some tweaking and adjustments as we look at grades and trees and such like that. So what we've given you the dimensions of the box that's on there that then can be finessed to sort of, as you get into the final design.
Okay, can you still hear me? I don't know how this works.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But Nettie, I'll
so-
also jump in.
Conversation now.
Sorry. So since I have looked at field dimensions, like a full-size lacrosse field, 60 yards wide by 110 yards, and there's usually another 18 to 20 yards for limit lines in the width. So it seems like that field is considerably bigger than what you need for full-size lacrosse, and soccer can be less, full-size soccer. So I guess that's one question, because it appears when it's bigger, there's just going to be more trees lost. Another kind of along the side of field use is, are you allowing or planning to allow professional teams to use these fields? And are you going to?
Nettie, I can answer that.
Okay.
We do not plan on allowing professional teams. I do not envision a situation where the San Francisco Giants come down and use that field, or the San Jose Earthquake come up to use that field. I don't for a game. All right, I don't envision that situation. And with regards to the field size, I think what you're referencing is the absolute bare minimum that a field can be to host certain types of events. And I think what we're trying to do is give ourselves a little bit of flexibility in that area. And if we end up going smaller than, say, that 180 feet by 330 feet, or that 260 feet by 430 feet, then we have that flexibility to do so. What we didn't want to do is come in and tell you it was going to be one size and then go bigger. And so I think that, one, that's important. And then two, we have to remember that this concept plan, this image is a concept plan, right? So it's not the detailed designs. It's not going to show you the specific location of each corner, and it's used as a way for us to be able to illustrate where amenities are located, how the flow of the park is going to be, and that's what's important that we take away from that conceptual illustration.
Okay, and then sort of another question is, when scheduling events, this is a comment I saw all over the newest errata. It says, quote, when scheduling events at the athletic fields, reserved picnic sites, and preserved administration building, the county would ensure that anticipated attendance does not exceed the parking capacity at Flood Park. And I'm saying, what does this really mean? How are you going to control use of the proposed activities?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the easiest way to answer that is the department would not schedule, and we will not schedule, a baseball tournament, a soccer tournament, and a farmer's market for the same time on the same day, or even frankly the same day, right? So that's what we mean by that, is we are going to look and we're going to look at what the proposed uses are, who's asking for use of the park, and how does that work together. I think the best example I can give you in our park system is Coyote Point. So at Coyote Point, we do not book up every reservation site, host our annual kite festival, and host a fun run on the same day, right? So the park, that's too much demand to put on the park. That's too much demand to put on the resources and the neighborhood and the staff. So we, the reality is we don't intend on doing something like that. And that's what that statement really signifies.
Okay, thank you. And just one follow-up to your heritage tree. You said there'd be no heritage trees removed. What is the size of a heritage tree? What denotes a heritage tree?
I'm sorry.
I'll
look that up.
Yeah, actually, and my arborist had just given me that answer, and I would have to look for that.
I'll get it for you while you're talking, okay?
Okay.
I believe it says there's going to be 40 significant trees removed. And I know at the smaller ball field, when I just kind of added up which ones were significant based on your tree plan, 18 were significant trees, 4 no, and 1 didn't have a delineation. It's on the plan, but there's nothing following up to know what it is.
Yeah, Nettie, I would challenge that. I believe of the 72 trees proposed to be removed, I believe 38 are under 12 inches in diameter, which wouldn't qualify as a significant or a heritage tree. So, so over half of the trees proposed to be removed are less than 12 inches in diameter. And I acknowledge and appreciate that preservation of trees was a priority, and we made it a priority. So when we were looking to site these facilities and these amenities, what we asked ourselves is, how do we preserve the largest, the healthiest, the most ecologically beneficial trees in the park? How do we preserve those so that we are protecting the environment and siting the facilities and the amenities in a way that doesn't remove those important ecological trees? And so that's what we were able to do, and that's how we really approached the assignment of how do we recite some of these amenities.
Yeah, I mean, it says in the new errata that there are 40 trees that would be considered to be significant with a diameter of 38 inches or greater.
I'd have to look at that. I'd have to look in the plan to see. Do you have a page?
If you ask me,
I can look that up.
yeah,
I'll look
find it.
Right.
I can't just pull it up just that quickly.
No, I can find
right,
it.
and then, but then, so I have actually looked at your tree diagram with respect to the new field number 16, looked at the tree diagram, and I went through and I checked the circumferences of the various trees that are in that new field, and I came up with 18 of those are considered to be significant, which is 38 inches in diameter or more. 4 are not significant with that diameter, and 1 has no information. It's on the plan, but there was nothing, no details in the tree diagram. So I guess that's the concern, although we're being told, you know, working around the environment, there's a lot of the oak trees, and a lot of them are quite significant in that location, which is why I think at the meeting, and you weren't on board at this point, Nick, but at the meeting in September 1st of 2015, when 3 different plans were presented to the community, and one of them was a sports plan that showed a youth field in essentially this location, and a guy stood up at that meeting and said, we really want a soccer field, but please don't cut down all those big trees. I sent it again today to the gentleman with Gates, since I saw the email, and I sent it to you prior. There are places where youth fields could be built with absolutely no tree carnage or very minimal. They might not be as big as what you proposed, but they would accommodate a lot of youth sports. And it just seems like the trees in this park is what is so special about it. It's such an unusual park in the middle of an urban setting. And there is such a huge amount of this park that is being slated now for large fields.
Well, I think, Nettie, I think what's important is there are over 900 trees in this park, right? So we are protecting over 92% of the trees in this park. And as I said, when we looked to recite these facilities, we had to ask ourselves, how do we provide the facilities that are being asked for by the public? How do we meet this growing demand for field space and for park amenities? And how do we do it in a way that protects the environment? And that's how we ended up with this plan, because the reality is we do protect the heritage trees, and we do protect the most ecologically valuable trees. And we are doing this in a way that minimizes its impact so that we are only impacting less than 8%. And once again, the old proposal impacted 80 trees. Now we're projecting 72 trees, which I believe, as I said, 38 are under 12 inches in diameter. So
right. But I want to just following up with that.
It's ask ourselves, how do we protect the resources in this park while still giving these vital community amenities? And that's what we strive to do in this park.
So 2 of the trees in this new field area, when I just looked up their diameters, one of them has a diameter of 150 inches and one has a diameter of 126 inches. Another has a diameter of 113 inches. And that's why I was wondering what constitutes a heritage tree. I don't know the answer to that.
So heritage trees, the heritage tree, actually for the county ordinance, it's by species of trees. So when you like look at an oak, a tree that's 48 inches in diameter would be considered a heritage tree. I don't know what that is in circumference. I have to do pi really quickly. But if the county ordinance lists through different species.
So 48 inches for an oak?
For a valley oak, I'm just pulling up one. So
Okay.
48 inches for a valley oak. So 48 inches in diameter for a
Okay.
valley oak is considered a heritage tree. And also for a coast live oak.
And also for a coastline oak.
You know.
Is there somewhere where that information is available?
Yes, it's on the county website. It's their you can Google heritage trees county of San Mateo, and there'll be the ordinance there, and it lists all the different tree species and their sizes.
Okay, great, thank you.
So Shari was not able to unmute herself, but she did post a question at 6:52. If Linda or Nicholas want to read that off and answer.
I can go ahead and read it. 6:52. All right. So my questions are related to field use. If they will be used for practice fields, I just wanted you to make sure you design the parking lot for drop-offs and pickups. It looks like you have a drop-off circle, but I wanted to verify that 17 is indeed a circle that allows cars to drop off and then return to the entrance exit. Also, have you spoken with Menlo Atherton High School? I believe they would be interested in using these fields during their sports season. So yes, you are correct. 17 serves that exact purpose, and we are allowing for drop-off and pickup, which, as we know, is a very frequent thing that is done for both practice and games. And so it has been designed in a way that allows for an easy and efficient drop-off and pickup. I have not personally had any conversations with Menlo Atherton, not to say they haven't reached out, but when we look at how can this park best serve the community and what type of policy and procedure we need to put in place for the scheduling of fields, things like local schools are things that we'll have to consider and speak with them while drafting this policy.
So there was a question, Lawrence asked a question at 6:51. I'm going back about during the design phase, how can he get on a committee like to help design the volleyball courts or the baseball fields? And if you have provided your email at any time during this process, or if you want to just provide it afterwards and stuff, during that phase, we'll be notifying all our email participants as well as having notices and such that go out. But we will track you down and make sure that you're aware that that's going on, or we will be putting out, flyers and things about it as well.
Yeah, and also I want to be clear. We want that process to be as open and inclusive as possible. So we will be making sure that we're reaching out to make sure people are aware of when the meetings are, opportunities to engage, and opportunities to provide feedback on those designs.
At this point, there are no other hands raised. All the other questions are posed in the chat box.
It seems like there's continues to be questions about desire to explore Off-Leash Dog Park, to maybe consider relocating the pump track closer to Bay Road. As I said, some,
Yeah, I hear that, this is something people are asking. I don't envision Flood Park as I certainly don't envision this landscape plan including a dedicated off-leash facility. I most certainly don't envision that. And I really truly believe that from an operations perspective and from a community benefit perspective, that using Flood as an on-leash facility is a great opportunity and makes sense and is something that we will want people to be able to do. I don't envision Flood having an off-leash facility.
Okay.
Nettie and Lawrence have follow-up questions, so I don't know if Linda and Nicholas, you want to follow up with some other community members, their questions.
And I think the other thing I want to add on that is that the county does have the Parks Department does have a dog work group, and that dog work group had the opportunity to both designate parks for off-leash opportunities and had the conversation of trails. Should off-leash be piloted on trails? Should it be piloted on in enclosed facilities? And what that dog work group said was, we want off-leash access on trails, and they explicitly did not want enclosed off-leash parks. That's not what was requested during that process. And so right now, as we as a department are going through an evaluation to possibly launch and looking to launch the first pilot program in our system that allows off-leash access, we have been following largely the recommendations and the guidance that has been provided by this work group, which did not include flood park and which did not want enclosed areas, but instead wanted trail access. So, when you look at what the work group was advocating for the first round of pilots, and you look at how we think flood is going to function and operate with these new amenities, I think off-leash is really not what's most appropriate, but I do think on-leash is absolutely appropriate for flood park.
We have Mary Pimentel in the queue. I don't think we've heard from her tonight, so I will unmute Mary to ask the question.
A couple of questions. Number one, is there going to be any accounting for how many people are in the park at one time? And number two, the eastern end of flood that backs up to the old flood school, if they develop that, would the park ever allow people to come through the park to access that if like residential homes were built there? And actually I have a third question. Hetch Hetchy goes right under the ball field as I understand it. So Flood Park can never be sold to be developed into housing. Is that correct?
Can you repeat that?
Number one, is there going to be crowd control or the amount of people that are admitted to the park at one time? I mean, one year, Cinco de Mayo, it was so crowded that they had a hard time getting people out of there. Mm-hmm. And if the park's going to be as wonderful as it looks like it's going to be, I'm sure it's going to be crowded. So is there going to be any crowd control or, limit to people admitted to the park? That's one question. Number
Mary,
two.
can I answer one at a time?
Sure. Is
that possible? Yeah. So, so as I stated earlier, right, the department's going to look at how we're reserving sites, and so that would be kind of the form of crowd control, is one, making sure we're not scheduling so many activities on the same day and at the same time that type of situation is going to occur. Also, what we'll do is, if we do have events going on in the park, we will make sure that the park is properly staffed to make sure people are able to get in and out. And by being able to get in and out, we will hopefully be able to mitigate the concern that you experienced on that day.
Okay. My second question is, the old flood school, which has been demolished, if they develop that, would you ever allow access to that property if they built houses on that to go through the park?
We would have to talk with them. I think that would be something we'd have to evaluate. We would have concerns with that based on both the impact to the parking lot, and you would likely have to eliminate some parking. So we would have some concerns about that. But, we'd have to see what the actual proposal is in order to make an informed decision. But I see that having some detrimental impacts to the park.
Okay, and my third question is, I understand Hetch Hetchy runs right under the ball field, and been told that this park land can never be sold for development because of that situation. Is that true?
Okay, so that was the one that originally kind of caught me on my heels. I do not know. I have not reviewed the title report for this property. I do know that if you follow the parking lot, the main entrance to the parking lot, and you follow a straight line that would run through essentially numbers 17, 9, 15, and 5. That's where that water line is. But I don't envision a situation where the department would sell the property for any for housing, right? I mean, I know there was at one point conversation about having the park go to Menlo Park for management as a park. I don't envision this ever being sold off and privately developed. I don't see a situation where that happens, but I don't know if there's a deed restriction on the property. I can't speak to that for sure.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And I really am looking forward to the new park. Thank you.
Of course.
So Michael, can we open it up to some people who maybe have a second question? Like I think Nettie has a second question.
Yeah, we're gonna get to Nettie, and then next up we'll do Raphael, who I saw had a question earlier, and then I see his hand is going up and down. So we'll get to Nettie's question first.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this question is actually, I'm asking it for our neighbor and city council member, Drew Combs. Drew lives in the Flood Triangle area, and he unfortunately had a conflict with the city council meeting tonight and couldn't attend. But he, I know, has, and I included this in my questions because he gave me his comment, that he's very concerned about the location of the pump track being so close to, again, a neighborhood. The prime users of the pump track are likely to be youthful boys, teenage or under, and sometimes there's problems with that age group. So he feels that the track should really be moved somewhere where the park staff can keep an eye on kids. I understand there's been some kids hanging around the park, and they've actually cut down some bushes so they can keep a better eye on some of the kids that have been hanging around the park. So that's kind of Drew wanted to make sure that got in there. And I know we're not at the design phase, but to just put that plug in there, that the location probably is not the best for the pump track.
And as I said, we're going to collecting all those kind of comments, and they'll be, passed on at the next phase. And then did you say Raphael had a question?
And Nettie, that's noted. Thank you very much for submitting on behalf of the council member. And that's something that I think will warrant some serious conversations during the design phase.
Next up, I have Raphael.
Hi, good evening.
Good
My name
evening.
is Rafael Avendaño. I'm a volunteer with the Trips for Kids Bulldog Riders, and I just want to thank you all for the revised landscape plan of 2020 for Flood Park. Been a part of this project for a long time. It's great to see it come to life. My question is, in what phase would you consider having the community build something similar to like a Friends of Edgewood, Friends of Wonderlick, to help bridge such divide that exists around just communities to be able to coexist? What I mean by that is for the biking community to coexist with the neighbors of the community so that they could take care of the park and could nurture it and support it. Just wondering when we should plan to organize to get that going, because that helps build relationships. And I think that's the most important part to having a park. Thank you.
Yeah, Raphael, I think that the answer to that question is probably now. I don't think something like what you're talking about has to be tied directly to this landscape plan. I think having a strong relationship between the park and its neighbors and its users is something that we should strive to do regardless of if there's a big project like this going on or not. So I think that's something that we would be more than happy to discuss. I think that's something we'd be more than happy to discuss and would most certainly encourage and would also just love to be a part of. So I don't think that needs to wait. I think we could, do that as soon as possible. And I think I would encourage you to do it as soon as possible as well.
We had a chat come in. How is phase 1 being funded?
Yeah, so phase 1 is currently funded for $15.2 million. So the board, the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, with leadership from Supervisor Warren Slocum, has put a considerable amount of that funding in, and a little over $1 million of that actually comes from Santa Clara County. And so as part of Stanford's general update plan, general use plan, they had to pay mitigation funds to the city or to the county of Santa Clara. And so the county of Santa Clara acknowledged that the county of San Mateo ends up being impacted by some of Stanford's uses and developments, and therefore made some of those funds available to us. And so the department submitted an application for some of those funds and was awarded funds specifically for pump track and fields, and a field.
We do have a raised hand from Lawrence, so I will unmute you.
You guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Hey, so my name's Lawrence, and I've been following this from the very, very beginning. I've been into all the meetings, and I just want to say you guys are doing a great job, and I really appreciate it. I know it's a lot of work. So there's a group of us that play volleyball. I'm kind of the volleyball guy. I've known Scott Lombardi, and we kind of use the sand courts down there and upkeep the current sand courts down there right now. And we have some, kids that practice, and we run kind of some club beach teams and stuff down there. So, we've been down there for the last 5-6 years on the current sand courts. So the first question I have is, we do use that park currently for organized sports. So I'm just curious, when at the very beginning I saw the slides come through that you had organized sports and you had recreational sports. So we do have, sometimes 10, 20 kids down there practicing, and then we go to tournaments in Santa Cruz on the weekend. So can this be placed, those sand courts be reserved for practices like the baseball and the soccer fields with, in the future? Because it is kind of an organized group that we have coming to the park over the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I think I am most certainly not opposed to having those courts be reservable. We most certainly want to make sure that they're also available for drop-in use. And what we would have to do after we've developed the policy and procedure as to how we schedule these facilities and amenities is add the courts to that. And once again, just make sure that they're available for both reservation and drop-in.
Yeah, I mean, we're only down there like 2-4 hours on a day. We'd probably use the park maybe 12-15 hours a week. It's not like we're there that often. So, way back when I helped Scott Lombardi, put some new, redo those sand courts about 5 years ago, we kind of dumped some extra sand in there, and our kids practice on it and stuff like that. And we're never there on the weekends. So, I mean, that's why I worked with Scott. We're there usually after school, and then we're there sometimes early mornings. But yeah, we're not there quite often. But we just want to make sure we have the ability to reserve, just like we want to make sure it's kind of an organized sport where we can reserve some time. I mean, we don't use that much, but we do want to be able to block off some time for some kids in their practices.
Yeah, I don't envision that being an issue, like I said, as long as it's still made available for drop-in use.
Okay, and then my last question, so is this kind of, I've seen the park go through all the iterations, and so it sounds like we're down to basically the end of this, where it's like, will things still change? Like, could there be 4 tennis courts or 3 volleyball courts, or reduced down to 1 volleyball court or 2 basketball courts? Is there still fluctuation, or is this kind of pretty much 99% done.
Yeah, the way I see this is that this is the plan that we will be presenting to the Board of Supervisors, and any change from this plan would require a CEQA analysis to determine if further impacts are going to be created or not. And so undoubtedly there will be questions that come up during the design phase. Undoubtedly there will be questions that come up before the board in November. And so, you know, while we envision that this is the preferred plan and the landscape plan, there will undoubtedly be requests for changes. And if changes are made, then we have to go through the evaluation process. But this is what is evaluated and reflected in the CEQA document, and this is what we'll be presenting to the board.
Okay. All right. I think you guys are great. I've been watching the whole process for the last five years, so I do appreciate your time.
No, thanks for being involved in it.
Got any more hands up?
No other hands raised. All their questions are posed in the chat box.
Well, I love the way people in the chat box are coming up with some great ideas and advising each other. It feels very like a very supportive community conversation. I think we've grabbed the questions that were in the chat box, but there are a lot of comments that we'll be recording just for use as we move through future phases. Is there anyone who still has a lingering question?
I see Alice Newton with her hand raised.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I do have a couple of things that I just want to put out there. And one is that I am a grandma now with kids, grandkids that just love this park. And I am very excited about the possibility of the All Abilities Playground. But I do have a concern about having the adventure playground so far from the other ones, because I think when they are separated, it's a very, it's a difficult safety issue for parental supervision when your kids are going to be kind of wanting to be in different places. So I would suggest that in the design phase that you consider moving the number 8 adventure play over closer to the other playgrounds. And by the same token, for some of the same reasons, I think that the Bay picnic area, the group picnic area that is now down at the corner by the Iris Lane gate, I think it's a long way from the playgrounds, and that is not really safe for parental supervision, and that it would be good if it could be looked at to put that picnic area more up closer to the other picnic areas and restrooms in the playground. I guess that's basically it, to consider these things from a parental supervision and safety perspective. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, and Alice, those are the types of things that you know, those are the types of conversations that will occur during the design phase, right? It's not the addition or the subtraction, but it's the relocation of flow and efficiency. So that's the type of conversation we're excited to have during the design phase.
Well, I am really looking forward to the design phase. I think it's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, well, it's a great beloved park, and hopefully it will only be more beloved.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I see that Nettie has just submitted a question. Nettie, I don't believe, you know, that's something that we consider, not to say that we're opposed to that. And that's something that we can discuss in the design phase.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting ideas that we want to revisit during the design phase. Good input.
I think Nettie has a follow-up question, so I will unmute her.
One other question has to do with the amphitheater. There's absolutely no assessment of the amphitheater in terms of who's going to use it, when, number of people, etc. And yet it's still in the plan. If you consider possibly eliminating it, there are so many other things in this plan already.
Yeah, we, you know, based on conversations that have been had and my understanding, right, the amphitheater is really an ancillary use. So if you have a farmer's market, that amphitheater can be ancillary to that. And if you do end up having a soccer tournament on number 16, right, you could have this ancillary use there for gathering. So we see it as a complementary use, not necessarily as a primary use. Have we considered getting rid of it? That hasn't been part of any of the conversations that I've been a part of, but I think that's the type of conversation that is appropriate during the design phase.
Because I know in the description it talks about, I don't remember everything, but weddings, concerts, a whole variety of other uses. And it just seems like it's a lot more use if it's ancillary is one thing, but if it's its own use is another.
Yeah, we view it as an ancillary facility, but once again, those are the types of conversations we can have during the design phase. And if you have a different use or idea, right, that's an appropriate time to discuss that. But we felt that it was appropriate to leave it in the landscape plan as proposed to the board for consideration.
So we had a question about, have you considered using vertical space such as an adventure tree house for kids? And yes, the fun part of this project would be when we start thinking about the design of the play areas and things like that. So I would encourage you to stay tuned for those when we get down to the fun part.
And to build on that, Linda, I agree, that is the fun part. And I think one of the cool ideas for the playgrounds is really making those playgrounds that serve everybody and are accessible to everybody. And there's some great examples out there, including the new playground that I don't think is open yet at Red Morton. That was done by a company that specializes in making sure playgrounds are, in fact, able to serve everybody, and even individuals with accessibility challenges. And so that's the type of thing that, like, we're excited to have that conversation. I mean, how do we make it so flood can be accessible and serving for everyone? I mean, that's really the conversation we're really excited to get started on.
Including the grandparents who want to play with their kids on the playground.
That's correct.
The question is, where is the entrance to the park? It's on Bay Road?
It's on Bay Road, but if you're looking at the illustration, if you see the bottom left, it says Ranger's House. Immediately to the left of that off screen is the entrance.
There'll be some pedestrian entrances along that street as well.
Yeah, that's the primary vehicular entrance. There are a few entrances along Bay Road, and then there's a pedestrian bicyclist entrance at Iris Lane at the top right of the screen. And to be clear, that top right area is only for pedestrian and bicycle access. That is not for vehicular access, and we don't envision that being for vehicular access.
All right, I don't see any other questions, raised hands in the block here.
It's still getting a lot of great comments. It's like, I don't want to shut down because I love all these comments that are ideas we want to save for, the design phase.
Yeah, and to address, Barry, thank you for your comment. I agree. Active scheduling and management of those is I think that comment actually goes for a lot of the different, for a lot of the facilities, but most certainly the amphitheater as well. And Lawrence, adding a third court is not something that we envision, because we felt like what we've had on there right now is reflective of the use we've been seeing, but also that's what's reflected in the environmental analysis. So once again, to go in and reopen these would take some of that.
No other questions, raised hands. I think Luke has one in the chat box.
Yeah, so Luke, yeah, so we very much plan, we very much we very much desire to have the first phase of Flood Park really done in, you know, the next 24, you know, around the next 24 months, assuming, or if I should say, the board adopts the landscape plan and certifies the EIR. So if that happens in November, you know, we fully anticipate that the design phase will take a year and that the construction phase of phase 1 will take a year. Well, so really you're looking at that 24, you know, 24, maybe 28 months. If we end up combining phases, then that could change that as well. But, you know, we fully want to get this park up and running and in a condition where it's serving the public, because this has been going on for 5 years. And we very much would like to be able to better serve the public. Agreed. Not Barry, agreed. Very exciting, not easy, but I'm very confident that with some of the companies out there and subject matter experts, I think there's something that can really be done that really changes kind of the game for playing areas.
Oh, yeah.
Mary has her hand up.
Okay.
So thank you all for coming out. We really,
One
really.
second, Linda. Mary Pimentel has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, thanks. Thank you for answering this. Is the park going to stay closed to vehicles until the park is re-imaged, or is this a COVID thing?
That's very much a COVID situation, and we do want to get that open as soon as we have the ability to do so. It has been a bit challenging given the state guidelines and requirements on many of the facilities that are included in flood. It makes management of that with vehicular access at the same time very challenging, especially with what the state's requiring for playgrounds. So coming up with a way to manage that, especially coming off of the fires and now being in the process of winterizing our parks, has been has kind of pushed our timeline back. But we do want to get that open as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And when it does reopen, it will be. And when it does reopen, there will be no vehicle entrance fee at that time. Will you, let's see, Nettie has another one. Will you be allowing more than one team to practice, play games on one field? I don't see how we would be doing multiple games, multiple practices. Yeah, absolutely. But we would have to assess multiple games and if that's something that's been analyzed, but multiple practices, absolutely. And Luke, comment. Anyone else? Okay. I think that's it, Linda.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. I love when we learn just as much as we answer. That's always a good sign when we're in it together here, guys. So that's nice. There is the Board of Supervisors meeting is in November 10th, I believe it is. And you may want to tune into that one, see their thoughts, and we'll be sharing some of the issues and comments you raised at this meeting with them. And hopefully they'll approve it and we can move on to the next phase.
Thank you, everyone, for participating tonight. We do appreciate it, and we appreciate your comments and your questions.
And thank you, Victor.
Thanks, Victor.
Thank you.